Yeah. So we'll start actually by remembering some of the stuff that we've done uh, throughout these years with some content that we have on our YouTube channel. So you can all check this later if you want. But some of the videos that uh, were some kind of summary and excerpts of some wonderful sessions that we've had. So I would like to start with this, which is one of the first videos of our channel,
Oh,
and
tell me
there's
about it.
a lot of the seekers there. And it's about, of course, John Coltrane and also Eric Dolphy, and this polemic that we don't have to talk so much about, the downbeat thing tonight, but I invite everyone to watch this video also afterwards, because it's about this article on the Downbeat magazine calling the song of John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy anti-jazz. So I just wanted to show a little bit of the introduction of this session and maybe a little bit of the thoughts of our seekers. What do you think, Ralph?
Absolutely. These are some of the our seekers that have joined us in some of our past sessions that we've had. Um, was John Coltrane or is John Coltrane a jazz musician? One of the things that we have points of contention that we have covered for so long is what about this is about this term jazz that we grew up with, but some of us have never questioned what it's meant and the meaning of it. During research, I have also gone into a book of quotes by John Coltrane, and he said, I don't subscribe to that term, jazz. He said, I don't like that term. However, he said, this is how they sell us. So it tells you something about the yin and the yang of this word jazz. Many musicians have challenged what that word means and how does it properly represent those great artists that have done it. Many of the great artists that we have heard have rejected that term. And I think it's basically up to the individual to whether they want to embrace it or they want to move on. But according to the article that Juan had mentioned about John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy. It was written in Downbeat magazines, I guess around 1963 or something like that, 62. And what was so strange about it is that they said that uh, they called the critics now, and I use that term loosely. I'm going to think of another term to call these people who put themselves in a position to talk about what our music is. But the so-called critics said, well, John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy are anti-jazz. Well, let me say this. I think that they were handing them a backward compliment, and they did not even realize the compliment that they were giving John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy. And they probably said, we're free from this word jazz that has been, we've been carrying around and for so long. But nonetheless, let us listen to some of the music that you have, Juan. Go ahead. Is that would anybody like to chime in on the article that was sent out? The article with John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy, and they were asking them. I think John Tyner was the New York critic that was writing about, yeah, and you read it, right, Bob?
Leonard Feather, yeah, I read it.
And then Leonard Feather chimed in, and they called them anti-jazz.
Anti, yeah.
Anti-jazz. Now these there was nothing but beauty and love in their music. John Coltrane, a love supreme, a supreme love. So you see what I'm saying? They were all about that.
They didn't have any answers for the music or anything like that.
They didn't know what to make of it. Yeah. They were living in the past. See, you know what? The same thing when you have innovative, creative artists. You know, which I think, you know, what I tried to do is like pull these innovative, creative artists into this art class discussions because they were alienated for being creative. You know, at first. Until they figure out they can make a lot of money off of John Coltrane records and Eric Dolphy and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But they were vilified very early on for what they were trying to do. And this was this became a pattern, you know, with Charlie Parker. It became a pattern when Miles Davis decided he was going to do Bitches Brew and On the Corner, when his electric period. You know, this is what artists went through. John Coltrane, what are you trying to do, John Coltrane? Sheets of sound. You know, it's a very, very, very enlightening and incredible article that I hope we get a chance to get in there deep.
The part of the article that I found was really pushing the envelope was them holding the critics to task and asking them to improve the critics process.
Yes, ma'am.
And having the critics process informed by the artist's words about what they were trying to do would make it so much richer. And they were open and very gracious about how they described that as a possible thing.
Just on that note, Just on that note, I was trying to find if Leonard Feather or John Tynan replied. And so far, I haven't done a deep search yet, but I haven't seen any kind of obvious replies on their part or rebuttal. It would have been very interesting to see. But it's also interesting to hear their silence. You know, the thing I was looking for in the article was a couple of words like anti-jazz and, you know, all of that. These guys didn't say anything about that. The whole thing was how much they loved it. And their love for the music. There was nothing anti or nothing, you know, even the word jazz was not even in there at all.
They didn't even say it. Did you notice that?
Thank you. I'm so glad.
You know, you got to be careful about trashing an artist, which then causes the certain parts of the audience, at least, not to even come or not to even listen and form their own opinions.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really relevant to all music or all art, really.
Art, yeah,
but,
exactly.
You know, it's one thing to say, you know, in my opinion, but when you start saying things like this isn't even music and this isn't, you know,
anti-jazz,
you know, it's anti-jazz, whatever, then it's really not giving the audience a fair shake or the artist a fair shake.
And you know, Thelonious Monk cornered one of the critics in New York like that. And he said, you know, when you write things like this hurts my family. It hurts, you know, and interrupts the way that I can make a living, you know, and they were totally oblivious to how hurtful some of the words that they put out there on these great people, you know, and what, you know, the repercussions of that. You know, well, you know, I'm in Chicago and you know, man, you know, you didn't get a good review on your last, so I'm not going to hire you. Or they said you were late, or they said they didn't understand you, or, you know, something, you know, that kind of thing. And it goes right into, Eric Dolphy said, he interjected that the critic should consult the musician when there is something the critic does not fully understand. Does that make sense?
Right. Exactly.
Wow.
The artist is always ahead.
Always, you know, but you have to talk to the artists and say, what's your philosophy? What are you thinking about? What is this? Tell me. You tell me.
Yeah.
I feel that many times, I feel that what was going on at the time was what I call that new music, inventing music or discovering music that had actually been never heard before by anyone, including the critics. And no one actually knew how to take it, and the critics basically took it upon themselves to be able to instruct us or to the public as to what they were hearing in comparison with what had been heard before. Sometimes they don't understand, what a person's trying to do with their music. Sure. And I shouldn't say sometimes, because with jazz, I think that was what was happening many times. People thought Coltrane's music was grotesque.
Yeah.
Up until the time that he made something that was familiar to them, like My Favorite Things and things like things of that nature. People could sort of get into Coltrane and what he was doing after he took My Favorite Things and made such a wonderful piece out of that. But that's been happening throughout the years. So I think that the critics, I'm not down on the critics, but I think it's probably not an enviable job. Period.
Listen, okay. The same thing happened with hip hop music. Okay.
Yeah.
You hear what I'm saying? Yeah. Totally terrible. This is not music. It's not that. It's not. All these things. And it's weird how people can put that kind of spin on the music. Not to say that it's all great, but all the music is not great. It's like an expression of the people, you see. My thought.
And I think the critics should take responsibility. And that's what they're not. They're not because they're in a heck of, like you say, they're in a very important position. And it's also like human nature to put those labels on stuff, to put it in a little compartment where they can understand it. You know, they put it over here and label it like that. And that goes back to the whole label of jazz, and that putting it in that thing.
Yes.
There we go. And you see that nobody brought that word up. Nobody said that in that article. Nobody said, well, Eric Dolphy has said something about, we said, what swing? Well, what do you mean swing?
Yeah. I'm sorry if I said it long, but...
That's great. That's just wonderful, man.
A great
I guess I had more hair then too, huh? Oh. That was wonderful. When you go back, sometimes oftentimes we go back and we listen to things or we observe things that we had said or topics that we have covered, and it's just eye-opening of opinions, and that's what makes ASM what it is. Should be aesthetically seeker speaking. Okay, go ahead, Juan.
So we're gonna just listen to a little bit of Eric Dolphy, and then an interview with his parents, and they talking about his practice.
Get up in the morning before he went to school, say about 4:30 or 5, and practice till it's almost time to get his breakfast and leave for school. And he'd hurry home to start practicing again until way late in the evening till we would tell him, And he had a little studio built outside for him. So afterwards, where he could be out there with that
Did he mostly just practice scales and exercise?
Yes, and tone qualities and things. He'd blow one note for all day long.
I've seen him blow one note on a saxophone for weeks at a time. And I've been out in the yard working, I'd go in and say, there's no more key in a saxophone but that one. And then he played, then he put on his tape recorder, he'd have it, then he listened to it. He said, that has got to be right.
Yeah, I just wanted to put this video next because I think it represents also what most of the seekers said at this session, about how the critics were just trying to create some kind of label or box to put the name of their music and not worry about the musical exploration that they were going through, and to be practicing something so thoroughly, with so much dedication and knowing what kind of sound you want to do, and that's why I remember of this session, brother, because you showed these both videos, and it was very impactful to me, and that's why I remember this, because it shows a lot of how people who are not musicians try to put us in those labels, but there's much less interest in how are we, overcoming ourselves musically all the time,
It also talks, it displays the seriousness of the artist. Even at a young age, Eric was after it. He was really trying to play one note. What an incredible task that is, to play one note forever, until you're satisfied, and then you go on to another note. And I know he's inspired me in ways that I can't even explain. I first heard Eric when I was maybe a teenager, and I knew he was doing something that I had never heard before, ever. And I have not heard since. Nobody has ever tried to emulate Eric Dolphy, whether on bass clarinet, whether on alto saxophone or flute. So what a blessing, to hear his parents talk about him and what he was doing at a very early age. He was after it. That's what I'm going to say. He was after something very, very special, that serious artists, serious musicians, whether they're painters or whether they are instrumentalists or vocalists or writers, whatever they were after at that time or during their lifetime, what they're trying to achieve. And that has all I hope that many of the young musicians will not try to emulate what Eric was playing, but to develop their own voice and develop their own approach to the instrument and be inspired by Eric Dolphy and John Coltrane and Yusef and all the the masters of this particular art form that we call autophysiopsychic music. Okay.
When they did this interview for Downbeat and all this thing was going on, it was kind of just the beginning, for what John Coltrane was doing to his music, And I remember when you played this song in the session from the Modes of the Black Arts movement, we talked about the relationship of the song with what was going on politically and vice versa, how the artists were influencing in the politics and vice versa, So I just want to play an excerpt also of this session about the Black Arts Movement, and a little bit of Ascension.
John Coltrane, as we know, is constantly trying to expand not only his quartet, but he would expand his ensemble to do some really incredible. He was always searching for the next level of evolution in the music and the next level of creativity that he was searching for. When Ascension came out in 1965, it scared everybody. Thus, we shall hear some of Ascension. Wow.
Yeah.
That music scared people because they had never heard. Well, many of the lay people had not heard anything like that ever before, and either it scares you into wanting more, or it scares you into not wanting any of this. Because you do not want to step into that area of the unknown. That's what it was, stepping into the area, into the land of the unknown. And this is John Coltrane would take us, as I always like to say, to the door of discovery. And then the door is open, so you have the choice of either going through the door or standing outside the door. Much like when you go, clubs. It kind of brought to mind the clubs that he would play at. And if you couldn't go inside, you could stand outside the club and hear what was going on, but it was still something that could scare you into wanting more of this. Give me more, Or what was it that he was doing? What are the questions? And some people didn't care, and that's okay. I don't think I think he wanted people to listen to what he was doing and appreciate it, because, they always say, everybody loves to be appreciated. So wonderful. Ascension. Ascension.
Yeah, and for the finale, I think just this little tribute of Brother Yusef, and the time that we did this interview on him, and it's just a little bit about his life and the life of Detroit.
Wow, him again?
It's weird to watch yourself, I know.
Abdul Lateef. And, we go back to, him being a fellow Detroiter. He was very acknowledged in Detroit by the musicians in Detroit. And I think that was because of his personality, his gentleness, and also for his seeking mind in the music that he was doing. And that was going back to the 1950s, and moving forward. This was kind of, this tells you about what was going on underneath in Detroit. And Yusef was a product of all of this, growing up. He went to a school called Sidney Miller High School, that had incredible young musicians. Every school in Detroit, every public school, had music departments and outstanding young musicians. And I think he was at Miller High School with Kenny Burrell. He was at Miller High School, I think, with Milt Jackson was there. All these soon-to-be outstandingly great musicians were all in school together studying music, and they made their names in this music historically. So yeah, he was what an incredible time for him to come up. And we did a tribute to Yusef in 2012 and it was called A Man of Honor. And he came, and he also invited a guy named Matthew Rucker, who was a guy that had a big band that gave Yusef his first job playing. And there's a picture of Yusef, with playing in this big band. I think he said he was 18 years old or something. How incredible, to get a start like that. And then, he starts playing with so many different people. He gets a call to join Dizzy Gillespie. Also, before that, Yusef's working. He's unloading boats. He's working in the factory, in the chemistry department of these. He's just doing all these things because he had a family. Yeah. And he knew the first thing was to support his family.
What a beautiful testimony.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I know it's difficult to watch yourself on video, but I just thought about this selection just because it's about the soul of ASM, I guess, which is you, which is all of these people, who are ancestors, and are a great part of what we are doing. So that's it. I'm sorry if it was too long.
That was wonderful, brother.